Hi, my name is Sage Tynan, and the typology of choice was Japanese courtyard gardens. Courtyard gardens were initially introduced at Zen Buddhist temples during the Heian period and have remained an integral part of residential architecture ever since. The design was originally taken and developed from traditional Chinese courtyards, taking the principles of feng shui. The courtyard acts as a symbolic gesture so that people could live in harmony with heaven, earth, and other people. This was achieved by not having a roof so the heavens could be seen, natural elements from the garden for creating the earth, and the courtyard itself being a place to gather. The Genji Monogatari, the tale of Genji, also dates back to the Heian period. This tale describes how these gardens would be dominated by a distinct plant. This plant would become associated with a person, who was commonly a woman, that would tend to the garden in the form of an epithet. The earliest references to courtyard gardens was between 794 and 1185, when a rectangular section between the main building of a palace and residential structures began to be adorned with a variety of flowers and plants. The gardens thereafter were commonly found in samurai residences and Zen temples. This was mainly due to the spiritual philosophical association and the architectural styles that were preferred by priests and warriors. Aristocrats of the time would be sent out on expeditions to select plants in the wild and bring them back to create an artificial spot to appreciate nature. Not nature as a whole, but only certain elements of it. The selected vegetation was associated with landforms. Maples and pine trees resembled hillsides and distant mountains respectively, whereas Keria would reflect upon water's surfaces. These gardens were a place for contemplation, imitation of nature in microcosmic form, ranging from components like a stone, a bonsai, or imitation of an ocean scenery in the miniature garden. These small replications of nature were associated with religious and philosophical thought. When brought together, these elements were to bring the energy of the cosmos and were believed to grant people longer health, better life, harmony, and peace of mind. During the Toyotomi Hideyoshi period, an enforcement was made that house lots had to allow for thin strips of space between one another. This ensured that courtyard gardens could get the necessary sunlight, ventilation, and air circulation. This overlapped with the Momoyama period. The courtyard gardens were being built frequently by residents within their townhouses and display stores. The term Tsuboniwa is used to identify the Japanese courtyard gardens, as it is a literal translation relating to its size and description of itself. When written in traditional Japanese kanji, it is split into two words, tsubo, meaning equal to 3.3 meters squared, and niwa, meaning garden or yard. Another translation of the word tsubo is a jug or a pot, i.e. a small container, giving an interpretation of how small the space is for the garden. Tsuboniwa gardens take from different styles of Japanese gardens. Examples are the Zen gardens, the tea gardens, hill gardens, and rock gardens. Typically, a few tsuboniwas can be found within a traditional Japanese home. The gardens themselves serve different purposes other than being ornamental, depending upon location. If at the facade of a house, it separates the house from the adjacent buildings, or, when located inside the building, it separates the public areas of the house from private areas, and it also becomes a symbolic visual barrier, not allowing everyone to see all of the inner space within the house. As houses in Japan have modernized, the tsubinawas also take on a practical function as well as an ornamental one. Ambi Flux House is a prime example of this. Built on a small spit of land, the house has a minimal footprint and extrudes up 5 stories. The garden is on the balcony of the upper floor and uses an area of less than 1 meter squared. At the entrance to this garden, one needs to take off their shoes and change them into a specifically prepared pair. In a miniature house, this garden was considered a necessary element as a space for relaxation, privacy, and contemplation. The common identifiable features of a tsubinawa are traditional elements such as bamboo bushes, groups of decorative stones, stone lanterns, low basins for water, paths, and bridges. These elements are accompanied by dynamic elements of trees, shrubs, and herbaceous plants. Now, if we move on to this page, you can see the brief history which I've just outlined throughout. on this following page are key examples of Japanese courtyard gardens, or subinawas, depending upon location and residence. These 4 down here are outside of Kyoto, so they were just prime examples of reinterpretations of it. On this page is the Kennenji Temple, my first example. It has some accompanying diagrams to break apart the garden itself and a description for it. This is the Ninnaji Temple, once again, diagrams to break it up and the project itself. Finally, the Ryo-gen-in Temple, once again, more diagrams along with the description of what the place is. And those are my references. Thank you for listening. Sorry? Thanks.